So I want to speak today on service with a smile. Service with a smile. I am so sick and tired of going to the supermarkets and the grocery store when the person behind the cash register has no reason whatsoever being behind there. Walmart. Huh? Walmart? You know, it's all right. You know, service is good, but when you can't give service with a smile, it's a real problem. And so I want to talk about service with a smile today. It seems as though this was a problem that Jesus constantly had with his guys. Wish I can say with girls also, but with the guys that decided to follow him, he had a real problem. And it is this problem of pecking order. We like the pecking order. We just love pecking order. If you put a whole lot of chickens, and some of you aren't from the farm, so you would have no idea what I'm talking about. So we had chickens when I was growing up. My mother always had chickens. We always had to go clean the pen, and it's always. But whenever you put a whole bunch of chickens in one pen, I noticed something that would happen. They all start picking on each other. Immediately, within a few hours, they're going to decide who is in charge. And they peck, and you know, one chicken runs in this corner and the other one runs in this corner, and the strongest of them would really walk around with a strut and would tell the others, I'm in charge. It's called the pecking order. And in business today, there is that term that is being used, the pecking order, and know your place, because in this company there is a pecking order. You just got here, so you are last. So there is a pecking order. And even with the disciples, they wanted to have a pecking order. You remember the little story of the mother who came to Jesus and she says, well, you know, these two guys, they told me that when you get into your kingdom, they want to sit on your right-hand side. In other words, they wanted a pecking order. They were very much obsessed with the idea of being served. And Jesus, of course, introduced the upside-down kingdom. Jesus was saying to them, don't worry about being served. You ought to think about serving others rather than being served. This was new to them. Everywhere I go, I get a real challenge to most people who think that because I'm the reverend, I'm supposed to sit on a certain table. Maybe it's cultural, but it just rubs me the wrong way. It's so un-Christ-like to want to sit on a special table. I don't care what the culture says. I don't care about the culture that says, well, you know, we have our special guests sitting here. It is un-Christ-like. This is not what Christ would ever do. You could never, ever have a special table when Christ walked in and say, Jesus, Jesus, this is your table over there. Christ will rebuff that very idea that you would have a special table for him. It is the upside-down kingdom. And that's why, as Barbara read, with a chuckle, the question, if you had a choice, would you rather be sitting at the table to be served, or would you rather serve? Whew. And they were like, what you talking about? Yeah. What a question. That's the question I want to answer. Would you rather others serve you, or would you rather serve? And that's why Trevor I put that little picture up there, and that's a beautiful picture. I don't know what you had on that day. But where was that picture taken? I don't remember. But that's why I put up there, service with a smile. We all are called to serve. But we serve with a smile. It is a privilege to serve. It is the highest calling of discipleship, to serve others. I happened to walk in the fellowship hall this morning, and I walked into the kitchen, and I saw Peggy and Patrick, the midnight workers, I call them. The people who are working and nobody knows. We just know that after church we go over to the fellowship hall and we all enjoy. But I saw Patrick and Peggy just in there getting ready to serve. And I said to myself, that's the highest calling, to serve others. Because I am convinced that we are not called to serve God. God does not want our service. I know God doesn't want my service. I can't even serve God. I'm not there yet. But I'm also very convinced that if I ever attempt to serve God, I can only serve God by serving my fellow man and my fellow woman. That's easier. It's much easier. By trying, we serve God, the invisible being, by serving each other. And we do it, LaShawn, with a smile. That's how we do it, with a smile. The highest calling of discipleship is the call to serve others. The story is told of the old stone monastery where a lot of visitors used to go. And over the years, the monastery got old, and all the monks were there in their quiet deliberation, in their quiet meditation. And over the decades, the amount of monks in that place dwindled. And now they had gotten down to about 8 or 9 monks in the monastery. And the abbot in the monastery met Jeremiah one day, and he said, Jeremiah says, how are things going? And the abbot says, Jeremiah, things are not going so well in this monastery. There are only about 9 of us left. And everybody is so demoralized, and everybody is so suspicious of each other. And we know that we're all going to die one day. Nobody visits the monastery anymore. Morale is really, really low. Every day people get up and they seem to be biting at each other. And Jeremiah looked at him, and Jeremiah says, Abbot, I had a dream. I had a vision. He says, really? I had a vision. I have a vision, and this is the vision that I got the other night, Jeremiah said. The vision I got the other night is that one of you guys is the Messiah. Really? Yes. One of you guys, you 9 guys up there, one of you is the Messiah. I don't know who it is, but one of you is the Messiah. And the abbot deliberated for a while, and the abbot says, one of us is the Messiah? And the abbot left in tears, went back to the monastery, and what haunted him most is, I know I'm not the Messiah. And if one of us 9 is the Messiah, he began to spread the word, and he told the other priests, he says, you know, one of us is the Messiah. It changed completely the atmosphere in that monastery. Because they walked around, and they were haunted by this thought, one of us is the Messiah. Is it she? Is it he? Their very attitude changed because they walked about serving each other with the full consciousness that just maybe one of us is the Messiah. And I thought about church. What would happen if we really believe that one of us is the Messiah? Venus? What would happen? What would happen if I really believe that one of us is the Messiah? Would it change your thinking? Would it change how you serve? Would it change how you talk to other people? If you really believe that one of us is the Messiah, how would you hand me a bulletin in the morning when I come to church? How would you say, yeah? What would you say to me when I walk in the door? If one of us is the Messiah, how would you treat me? Well, I've got bad news for you. Every one of us is the Messiah. Every child here is the Messiah. Every man, woman, boy, and girl, there is the Messiah. And the way you treat me is the way you treat the Messiah. The way you treat any individual in this church, that's the way, because we are not called to serve God, we are called to serve each other. So let me tell you 3 things about servant. Because who is doing tennis? One of your children is doing tennis. Is it Brian? Brian is doing tennis. So let me give you 3, Brian, make sure you write this down. Let me give you three little suggestions to improve your serve. Brian, 3 ideas to improve your serve. If you want to get a good serve, Brian, there are 3 things you must remember. Number 1, if you're going to improve your serve, number 1, check your motives. If you're going to improve your serve, check your motives. Got that? Secondly, if you're going to improve your serve, look to your model. Who is it out there that's got a bad serve? Now, don't tell me you're not going to say Serena. So watch out. Check your motives if you're going to improve your serve. Number 2, look to your model. And number 3, if you're going to improve your serve, number 3, expect some misery. Yeah, expect some misery if you're going to improve your serve. Check your motives. God has called all of us to serve, but occasionally we must check our motives for service. Why are we serving? Why are we serving others? Is it so that somebody can say, thank you? I found that out a long time in the kingdom of God. If you're serving to hear somebody say thank you, you're in the wrong business. The motive for service is not so that somebody can recognize you. That's not why you serve. You serve because it is the highest calling of discipleship. Check your motives. And that's the problem that the disciples had. Their motives. They wanted to sit on the right, and they wanted to sit in certain places, and that's the reason. That's the only reason they wanted. They always wanted to make sure our motives. If we don't check our motives, we will always end up in trouble. And so, Madison and G are out in the restaurant eating. And Madison and Giovanni are walking out the restaurant, and there is a young man, and the young man looks, and the young man says, "Could you help me with $1?" And Giovanni was going to stop. But Madison said, "Come on, boy." Come on. And they walk away. At about 100 yards, there is another guy that says, "Can I have $1?" And this time, Madison was going to stop. And Giovanni says, "Come on, girl." And then they meet a third person. And Giovanni just heard, "Could you help a veteran?" And Giovanni immediately says to Madison, "Don't stop me." Just veteran sparked something in Giovanni, and Giovanni says to Madison, "My father was a veteran, is a veteran." And Madison says, "My father is a veteran." And they says, "No, we got to give." Their reason for giving that day was for one purpose. He's a veteran. And they circled, and when they came back, they saw the guy with some liquor in his hand, drinking. And they are so annoyed, and they are cussing each other out, and they are beating up on each other because they are disappointed. They gave because he's a veteran. Well, that's the wrong reason for giving. Check your motives. You give because it is right to give. That's all. That's it. Forget what the person does with it. That's not that you yourself don't seek the gratification. It's not self-gratification. And Madison and Giovanni spend the rest of the week in remorse that they took their $1 and gave it to somebody who they thought was a veteran, but turned out he was not. Check your motives, Breon. Why are you swinging? Why are you doing what you're doing? In ministry and in this call to discipleship, we must always question our motives. Why are you wanting to do good? I learned that as a little boy. I was probably 9 years old. You know, in Trinidad, mothers go to the market on Saturdays. That's when mothers dress up. My mother, she dressed up. She dressed to kill to go in the market on Saturday. And I could never forget that day when the hours passed and she never got home. And finally to get home and to hear the bad news that she lost her purse, she lost her money, and nobody would give her a ride. I was 9 years old. 3.5 miles, point, to Huberstown. And my mother came home in tears saying she lost her purse and nobody would give her a ride. Everybody thought she was a bum. And as a kid, I thought about that. I said, as good as you look, nobody gave you a ride? And I thought about it. I said, and I questioned my mother. She said, nobody believed I lost my money. It changed my life. We must always question our motives. Why do we do it? We do good because it is right to do good. As a matter of fact, there is only one place in the Bible that defines sin. And we have all kinds of theology, Earl. There's only one part of the Bible that defines sin. It's found in the book of James. And this is it. He or she that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him or to her it is sin. Boy, that's kind of heavy. If you know what good is and you don't do good, you have sinned. It's called the sin of omission. We get excited and theological about the sins of commission. And we are always, oh, well, when you doing this is a sin, or doing that is a sin, or doing the other. No, James says there's a sin of omission. And the sin of omission is if you know what good is and you choose not to do good, you have sinned. Boy, that's kind of heavy. And then we throw our motives out through the window. When I did workshops on compassionate ministry, I always ended my workshop by saying to the folks who wanted to get involved in workshop, this. And I always said, why you do what you do is more important than what you do. Always. It's not just what you do, but it's why are you doing what you're doing? And if you really want to get frustrated, get your motives messed up. Boy, you'll be so frustrated. Brian, number 2, look to your model. If you really want to serve, look to your model. And to the Christian, your model is Jesus Christ. Boy, look at him. Look how Jesus Christ served. He was getting down to the end of his life. And all the apostles were all obsessed about this kingdom that he came to establish. And they met and they says, I am better than you, and I've been following him. Well, he called me from a boat. Well, he called me from a river. Well, and Jesus gathered all of them around. And he says, this is a whole lot of hogwash. Which one of you is the greatest? Which one of you? Philip, because you brought Andrew? Which one of you? Matthew, because you're a tax collector? Judas, because you're stealing and nobody found you out? Which one of you? Which one of you should be elevated to this position, because in a few weeks I'm going to be dead and gone? Who is going to lead this group? And they all wanted to hand in their resumes. And Jesus says, no, I'm speaking French. Ain't that Creole? And Jesus says, now let me tell you who really is the greatest. And Jesus says, bring a towel. Bring a basin. I'll show you what greatness in the kingdom is all about. And Peter says, no, you're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus says, that's what greatness is about. Greatness is not about the person whose feet are being washed. Greatness is about the person who is willing to wash other people's feet. I was pastoring a church in Washington, D.C., and boy, what a great community of hope. The greatest privilege of my life. Never saw so many drug addicts in ministry. Never saw so many alcoholics, prostitutes, down and outers, felons. And boy, what a great, I felt at home. And we started a ministry in the AIDS in a home, St. Joseph's House. A home with AIDS patients, all men, 12 of them. And every one of those men was dying with AIDS. They went there because it's their last. They will never leave that place, St. Joseph's House. And we started a ministry. I started a ministry in Joseph's House, and I would just go over there every Friday. They cooked. Every man in there was full-blown AIDS. And we got over there, and my kids were smaller. And we go over there, and we found out that the AIDS patients, the men, they helped cook the meals on Friday. And we would go over there, and my kids were like, Daddy, who cooked? And I said, oh, all the guys. And my kids wouldn't eat. They just couldn't bring themselves to eat because the AIDS, the guys with full-blown AIDS, they helped cook. And I look forward to that experience. And I ate. Every Friday, I would go in there and I would eat. I knew better. I knew you couldn't catch AIDS that way. One of the men, you talk about Glenn can dress. Glenn, one of the men, tall. And I knew this brother used to do it. He was tall, dark, and handsome, probably 55, 60 years old. He would come with white shoes. I mean, he was dressed full-blown AIDS, but boy, he can dress. And he would come to church on Sunday morning. Boy, he would be so sharp. He knew he was dying. Everybody else knew he was dying because he's full-blown AIDS. And I announced that we were going to have a baptism. And he was one of the persons that was supposed to be baptized. And I remember the young lady who wanted to be baptized, and she says, I'm not going into that pool after him. Let me be baptized first. And I said to her, he is going to be baptized first. If you can't be baptized after him, we'll have another day when you're going to be baptized. And she didn't get baptized. And then so here comes my foot washing service on the last day in December. And I said, plan to wash somebody's feet in the service. Plan to wash somebody's feet. And she says, I ain't washing nobody's feet but my husband. And I said, fine. Wash your ugly husband's feet. But something happened when the service started, because this brother was in the service. But God has a way of working on folks. Brother Talbot, God has a way of getting next to folks. And we got in that service, and we were finished testifying. And she got up, and she said to him, please come. I want to wash your feet. And she told her husband, you're going to be later on for you. And she asked this guy with full-blown AIDS to come. I want to wash your feet. And I saw a change in her own life that day, that night. Well, by this time it's morning. And when everybody else had finished washing their loved one's feet, Rian was the one who got up, and Rian said, all you are the children who didn't have anybody to wash your feet. Come on. I saw God work that night. As Rian, the stuck-up one, Rian sat there and called all those little children and says, no, I want to wash your feet. And I said, my gosh, God has come in this place. That's what service is all about. Check your model. And lastly, if you're going to improve your serve, expect some misery. Because you're going to be called all kinds of stuff just because you helped. Don't get mad. That's it. Well, I need to tell you that very quietly. It comes with the territory. It does. When God calls you to serve, God calls you to a life of abuse. Woo, Lord. And no wonder he looked at them and he says, are you, when they wanted the positions of power, he looked at them and he says, are you willing to drink of the cup that I am going to drink? You want to be great in the kingdom of God? It's a life of abuse. It's a life of nobody taking your advice. You want to serve? People tell you, go to hell. You want to serve? That's what you get. Be ready for a life of abuse when you want to serve. Because when you are serving, and this happens every day, when you are serving, as soon as you start serving, everybody else will tell you that you're serving wrong. Come on, Brian. And Brian is out there serving. She has embraced her model. She knows how Serena does it. And she loves Serena. And she is serving the same way. She has looked 1,000 times at her model. And this is the way Serena serves. And I tell you that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids will come around and say to Brian, you're doing it wrong. And unless every now and then Brian goes back home and Brian says, Daddy, could you pull up Serena again? Let me see. Let me check my model. Let me just check my model. And we all have to do that when we serve. Every now and then, reconnect with this Jesus who called you to serve in the first place. Amen. What am I doing wrong, Jesus? Jesus will say, nothing. Go back out there and serve. That's what I call you. I call you to a life of abuse. I like the story of the bamboo. You Americans don't know about the bamboo, do you? Except bamboo paper. They still have that? Yo. We don't know what a bamboo is. The bamboo is a tall tree. Not B-A-M-B-U. B-A-M-B. Oh, the bamboo tree. It's a tall tree. One of the tall trees that you use. And the bamboo, you see, the bamboo grows, Cynthia, and it's so stately. And when that bamboo begins to grow, the bamboo peers over and looks at you and says, good morning to you, the bamboo tree. The bamboo tree is like a peacock. The bamboo tree has pride. And the bamboo just sticks up in your garden. And in the morning when you look, that bamboo is just looking at you, and the bamboo is all tall. And the bamboo seems to say, hi, hi. You remember that, Daphne? Not what you used to do by the bamboo. The bamboo. And you look at the bamboo, and the story is told about this bamboo tree. And the farmer comes to the bamboo tree, and the farmer says to the bamboo, I'm sorry, but I have to cut you down. And the bamboo says, what? And he says, yes, I thought you liked me. I've seen you come in the mornings and you look at me and you are so proud of me. And the farmer says, I got to cut you down. And the bamboo says, cut my leaves off, but don't cut me down. And the farmer says, Sister Bamboo, I could never use you the way you are. I've got to cut you down. I've got some place to put you, but I can't use you where you are. And the farmer says to the bamboo, as a matter of fact, when I cut you down, let me tell you this. When I cut you down, I'm going to cut you in pieces. And let me tell you something else. When I cut you down and I cut you in pieces, I'm going to dig your heart out. And the bamboo says, is there another way you can use me? You got to do all of that? And the farmer says, yes, I can't. You are no use to me where you are, as you are. And the bamboo finally says, well, if that's the only way you can use me, use me. Cut me down. With all of us, the only way God can use us is if we get cut down sometimes and our heart gets dug out. And the farmer takes the bamboo, and the farmer cuts the bamboo in pieces. And the farmer goes down to the stream where he's planting the rice, and the ravine and the river is flowing, and the farmer takes pieces. This is mine or yours? That's yours? This is mine. And the farmer takes these pieces of bamboo, and the farmer goes down to the riverside, and he begins to plant the pieces of bamboo. And he goes over to the rice paddy, where the water flows over onto the rice lagoon. And he takes the pieces of bamboo and he plants them. And some months after, he goes, and as he looks at these pieces of bamboo, he sees them shooting out into new bamboo plants down by the ravine, over at the rice lagoon. And he talks to the bamboo and he says, see, if I didn't cut you down, you couldn't be a blessing in the rice lagoon. If I didn't cut you down. And so I hear Jesus saying to us, I am calling you to a life of abuse because I'm calling you to a life of service. And if you remember nothing else today, you are a bamboo in the hand of a great God. And sooner or later, you're going to be chopped. So that you can be useful in the hands of the Almighty God. Check your motives. Every now and then reacquaint yourself with this model, this Jesus. What would Jesus do? And then be aware of this fact that when God calls you to a life of abuse. It's the part we don't like. Are you being called to serve? Are you being called to that highest of callings? To serve God, excuse me. To serve humanity. God does not need your service. What God needs you to do is to serve each other. That's the highest calling. And it's indiscriminate. You have no choice in the matter of who you serve. God calls us to serve all, and there are some that you will find that it is very unpleasant to serve them. That's not your task. Your task is to say, yes, Lord. I will serve. Information, please. Information, please. It reminds me of Paul. Paul was the little kid. Who picked up the telephone on the wall. Or he saw his parents going to the telephone on the wall. And the first thing they would say is, information, please. And this little 8-year-old Paul, he was fascinated with how it's the old-time telephone. He was fascinated with how his parents could go to the wall and pick up this thing and then talk. And he says, man, there's a little genie in there. And Paul would pick it up. Information, please. And Paul had a game. Every time Paul went to and picked it up, information, please, and some voice would answer. And the lady on the other side would always be so nice to Paul. And Paul would say, I just hit my finger with the hammer. And she was so nice, and she would say, are your parents home? And he says, no, nobody is home. And the voice would say, go to the refrigerator, get a piece of ice, and put it around your finger. And then next week, Paul would go by, and Paul would say, could you help me with my geography? And the person was always so nice. And she would say, okay, what book are you in? And he did that for years, always. Information. This is information. It's always that one voice. Paul grew up, and Paul went to college. And Paul was in college, and he became lonely in college. And he was coming back home to one of those visits. And he looked at the phone, and he says, I wonder if that voice is still there. And he picks up the phone. Information? And it's the same voice. And he freaks out. And he says, do you know calculus? And she said, no, I don't know calculus. And he was disappointed. Paul went back to college. And in college, Paul called the voice, called information. And the lady says, I never told you, but my name is Sally. And over the years, I've been your best friend. 3 weeks passed, and Paul called. And Paul said, Sally. And the voice says, no, this is not Sally. Who are you? I'm Paul. Well, let me just tell you, Sally passed away last week. And your name is Paul? Well, Paul, Sally left you a message. Sally says, Paul, I've never had children. And whenever you called, it was a child that I never had. And by the way, I still don't know calculus. Goodbye. God calls all of us into a life of service. And that life of service will bring rich dividends to us. That's a promise. It's not a threat. God will break you so that God can plant you somewhere else. And the little boy said to his mother, I don't understand why it is birds in a cage, they are so beautiful and they sing so beautifully. Why is it that they all end up at the bottom of the cage? A bunch of feathers. And she said, that's because there is another land somewhere where they go to sing. We'll all end up as a bunch of feathers in a cage. But thank God there is hope. We're going to be singing somewhere else, even as we end up as a bunch of feathers. All right, Ian.